When Caesar's law contradicts God's law, we are not obligated to keep it. Welcome to The Warrior Bride. I'm Autumn Woods, and today we're continuing to look for lessons in godly masculinity through the book of Daniel. Did I title this episode with the boys' Babylonian names? Yes, I did. But I wanted to make sure that nobody missed this video just because they can't remember how to spell Hananiah. Last time, we saw our first example of the young men using civil disobedience as a way to honor God while living in a culture that does not. The Hebrew boys in Babylon demonstrated that being prevented from physically fighting against an ungodly king does not take away your autonomy and power as a child of God. But what happens when the stakes are higher? What happens when an abomination against God becomes the law of the land? King Nebuchadnezzar had an intricate dream and called all his practitioners to come interpret it. They wanted him to tell them the dream first, as would be the normal practice. But in a fit of passion, the king demanded that they tell him the dream and the interpretation. They insisted that only the gods could do such an impossible thing. Nebuchadnezzar, in turn, ordered all the wise men to be killed, which included Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Fortunately, Daniel bought them some time so that they could call on the Lord, who revealed the dream and its interpretation to Daniel. Daniel then appeared before the king, gave God the glory, and delivered the complete message. In the dream, using an image made of different metals gradually decreasing in value, with the gold head representing Nebuchadnezzar, the Lord revealed to the Babylonian king the progression of rulers which would come after him, and how all the kingdoms would be crushed by the Messiah's rule, which would stand forever and ever. In gratitude, the king made Daniel ruler over the province of Babylon and over the wise men, and his friends received high governmental positions. The trouble was that the king took the dream and ran off the rails with it. Immediately after this, Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold, whose height was 60 cubits and its width 6 cubits. He set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon, and King Nebuchadnezzar sent word to gather together the satraps, the administrators, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image which King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then a herald cried aloud, "To you it is commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages, that at the time you hear the sound of the horn, flute, harp, lyre, and psaltery in symphony with all kinds of music, you shall fall down and worship the gold image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast immediately into the midst of a burning fiery furnace." Notice that the whole image is gold, like the head that represented King Nebuchadnezzar in his dream from the Lord. The king took a good symbolic thing that God gave him and perverted it into an abomination. Instead of being pleased that the Lord had granted him power and glory during his reign and seeking how best to serve Yahweh with it, Nebuchadnezzar built a midlife crisis idol to himself based on God's message. The order to worship this 90-foot monument of pride is a complete violation of the first and second commandments. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image, any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow to them, nor serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God. Even though Daniel is not featured in this story, we know he isn't going along with this based on his character. His position may have given him more opportunities to excuse himself from the proceedings. His friends, however, were very obvious in their refusal to participate. Several of the Chaldeans accused them before the king. "There are certain Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego. These men, O king, have not paid due regard to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the gold image which you have set up." Then Nebuchadnezzar, in rage and fury, gave the command to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego. So they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar spoke, saying to them, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the gold image which I have set up?" Now if you are ready at the time you hear the sound of the horn, flute, harp, lyre, and psaltery in symphony with all kinds of music, and you fall down and worship the image which I have made, good. But if you do not worship, you shall be cast immediately into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you from my hands? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If that is the case, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us from your hand, O king. But if not, let it be known to you, O king, that we do not serve your gods, nor will we worship the gold image which you have set up. There is a right way and a wrong way to handle situations when someone in authority challenges your faith. In this short encounter of civil disobedience, the boys demonstrate three crucial things to us. 1. Honor God first. They refuse to worship this idol because of their allegiance to God. He said, "You shall have no other gods before me." This doesn't just mean putting something above the Lord. When God says, "before me," it also means in my presence. It means venerating anything in conjunction with the Lord, mistakenly believing that you can elevate God and something else. God and my pride, God and Eastern religious practices, God and witchcraft, God and a cultivated sexual identity, God and this or that influential person. Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah understood this. Lifting up this idol of the king and then turning around to lift up the Lord is a non-negotiable no. 2. Honor your earthly leaders. In their refusal to honor the idol, the young men were not disrespectful of the king. They understood that God set Nebuchadnezzar up to be the ruler in that age. Daniel acknowledged that God raises up and tears down kings at his will. Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah heeded the words of the Lord given through the prophet Jeremiah. I have made the earth, the man, and the beast that are on the ground by my great power and by my outstretched arm, and have given it to whom it seemed proper to me. And now I have given all these lands into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, my servant, and the beasts of the field I have also given to him to serve him. So all nations shall serve him and his son's son, until the time of his land comes. And it shall be that the nation and kingdom which will not serve Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, and will not put its neck under the yoke of the king of Babylon, that nation I will punish, says the Lord, with the sword, the famine, and the pestilence, until I have consumed them by his hand. So, to rebel against Nebuchadnezzar as king was clearly outside the will of God. The Lord had appointed him ruler over all nations, and commanded even the animals to serve him. This detail harkens back to the original description of mankind's Edenic dominion and indicates Nebuchadnezzar's absolute rule over every creature in his territory as ordained by God. Some of you may be uncomfortable with God calling Nebuchadnezzar his servant. The man was reactionary, bombastic, and he doesn't fit the profile we would expect of a servant of God. But he was who God chose to work through at this time.
Fiddle.
When the trio addressed him, they acknowledged his authority as king. They didn't threaten him with fire and brimstone because of his wickedness. That would have been stepping out of line and was clearly not God's will. But they refused to honor him as a god because his authority ended at kingship. And contrary to the belief that pervaded most cultures about monarchy, that did not extend into godhood. When they declared they did not need to answer him in this matter, it wasn't out of insolence. It was because God had already shown himself superior to Nebuchadnezzar and all his underlings. Yahweh was the God who would deliver them from his hands. The young men honored the king, but they would not honor a law that conflicted with God's law, which is infinitely higher. We render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and we render unto God what is God's. When Caesar's law contradicts God's law, we are not obligated to keep it. 3. The men demonstrated sincere submission to God. They declared that even if they were martyred, even if God did not save them, he is still sovereign and they will continue to honor him, even if his will conflicted with their own. Jesus echoed this in the Garden of Gethsemane when he said, "Father, if it is your will, take this cup away from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done." Keep this in mind during the next segment. Then Nebuchadnezzar was full of fury, and the expression on his face changed toward Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego. He spoke and commanded that they heat the furnace 7 times more than it was usually heated, and he commanded certain mighty men of valor who were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego and cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their coats, their trousers, their turbans, and their other garments, and were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, because the king's command was urgent and the furnace exceedingly hot, the flame of the fire killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego, fell down bound into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Then Nebuchadnezzar was astonished, and he rose in haste and spoke, saying to his counselors, "Did we not cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire?" They answered and said to the king, "True, O king." "Look," he answered, "I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God." This is an example of a Christophany, an incident where Jesus visibly appears to interact with human beings before his fleshly incarnation. Jesus was with Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah in the midst of the flames. The men literally got to experience Isaiah 43:2. "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through the rivers, they shall not overwhelm you. When you walk through fire, you shall not be burned, and the flame shall not consume you." This has always been one of my favorite Bible verses. It acknowledges that the trials and difficulties will come. That's non-negotiable. But if you belong to the Lord, He is with you, and He will not let you be destroyed. And even if your physical body does perish, you are with the Lord, and your spirit stays with Him. Then Nebuchadnezzar went near the mouth of the burning fiery furnace and spoke, saying, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here." Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego came from the midst of the fire, and the satraps, administrators, governors, and the king's counselors gathered together, and they saw these men on whose bodies the fire had no power. The hair of their head was not singed, nor were their garments affected, and the smell of the fire was not on them. Nebuchadnezzar spoke, saying, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego, who sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him. And they have frustrated the king's word and yielded their bodies that they should not serve nor worship any god except their own God. Therefore, I make a decree that any people, nation, or language which speaks anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made an ash heap, because there is no other God who can deliver like this." Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego in the province of Babylon. These men bravely stood their ground in the face of social pressure, corrupt culture, and governmental opposition, refusing to bow to anything and anyone less than the Most High God. Yahweh was magnified on the altar of their lives. God refined the young men through this trial by fire and rewarded them for their steadfast endurance and obedience under hardship, giving them more influence and power so that His kingdom could be further established on earth, even in the midst of a heathen nation. What are some areas in which you've caught yourself bowing to the culture of the world? Do you look, sound, and act like a child of God who has the authority to trample on serpents and scorpions? Or are you playing with serpents and scorpions so no one asks questions? Your choice to be set apart and honor God, even at the cost of your position and your life, creates an opportunity for God to be glorified. If you're finding value in this content, don't forget to like, sub, share, and hit the bell. New episodes drop Saturdays at 9 a.m. See you soon.